Korengal on a Chinook. A Chinook is the Greyhound bus of Afghanistan. It's a Vietnam-era helicopter which looks like a giant grasshopper, capable of carrying an entire platoon, about 35 guys, complete with all their rucksacks and duffel bags packed to the brim with everything one would need for the next 15 months. We also had an escort of 2 Apaches, attack helicopters as sexy-looking as they are lethal. For whatever reason, my leadership told me absolutely nothing about where we were going. All I knew was we were going to Afghanistan, which was way safer than Iraq, right? My understanding is all the NCOs, non-commissioned officers, which is just a fancy term for sergeants, were taken aside back in Italy and had a thorough brief in the post theater. This must have included stats such as number of firefights in a year, number of KIAs, WIAs, etc., and those statistics were probably enough to make you consider going AWOL, absent without leave. Why my NCOs didn't disseminate that information down to us, I couldn't tell you. Maybe they didn't want to scare us. Maybe they didn't want us booking a flight to Canada or hopping the next train to Switzerland. They just said vague things like Sergeant Williams kicking back on his cot in Bagram telling us, "I don't think you guys are ready for this," and our dildo squad leader saying, "You better not embarrass me." Sergeant Newcomb was always more worried about us embarrassing him than he was in actually training us. And soon enough he would do a better job of shaming himself than we collectively could ever do. Anyway, back on the bird, Chinooks have these little round convex windows that are like looking out of a fishbowl. Through the Chinook's fishbowl windows, we could see the terrain becoming more forested and steeper. And I mean steep. The Korengal is part of the Hindu Kush mountain range and lays just 20 kilometers from the Pakistani border. It was a formidable sight. This was my first deployment, and I was getting knots in the old stomach. The bird hooked a left into a narrow valley and proceeded high above the riverbed for what felt like another 5 minutes. The hydraulics inside make this high-pitched whine so loud you have to lean over and scream into the next guy's ear to say anything. "When we touch down, make a chain, get everything off the bird as fast as possible," was the message being passed along. Finally she slowed and began to descend on her big flat belly towards a large gravel-covered patch. Several shanty buildings were scattered about. The wheels contacted the ground, and we began to unload, but with nearly no sense of urgency. Against the wall of what I would come to know as the motor pool were several squads from 10th Mountain, waiting to board the bird we were exiting, and finally get away from this godforsaken valley. We must have looked like a bunch of cherries to them in our brand-new uniforms and freshly washed body armor. Their gear, uniforms, and faces were beyond filthy, and they were visibly nervous, attempting to press themselves into the plywood building they were taking cover behind, as if they expected the entire valley to explode at any second. It didn't take a psychic to tell they were appalled at how long it was taking us to download the chopper. The rucks and duffels were heavy, anywhere between 60 to 100 pounds, and one after another they kept coming down the human chain. The temperature was in the triple digits, and standing behind a Chinook entails being blasted by the rotor wash and the brow-tightening heat of its twin-turbine engines. I was thinking, well, we're in Afghanistan. What is up with these bags? This sucks already. What I should have been thinking was, these mountains are packed with nary a tree nor rock without a well-armed, American-hating disciple of Allah behind it, who's not too good to sleep with a sheep or cut your head off on the internet, so you best get all this bullshit squared away quick-like and get the fuck out of the open. But we just didn't know no better, and we were goddamn lucky we lived to walk off the LZ that first day. Now that all the gear was downloaded, the 10th Mountain rushed past us, loaded their Freedom Bird, and flew away, leaving us to try to find our personal ruck and duffel in a veritable mountain of rucks and duffels. This, too, left us exposed in the open, and no one proceeded with much haste. Finally, being reunited with my belongings, I began walking up a winding trail through the KOP, a.k.a. the Korengal Outpost, that led to 3rd Platoon's new hooch. Carrying probably a couple 100 pounds, I wasn't walking for maybe a minute before I was winded. I stopped to catch my breath and looked up at the mountains towering around me. I suddenly felt very small. Upon finding our tent, the big green dusty variety with plywood floors and bunk beds